Welcome. I'm your host, Carolyn Morrison, and on this episode of Mysteries of the Church, we will be looking at the long-standing tradition of the papacy. It is no secret how important the Pope is to the Catholic Church and to the world in which we live. The Pope is truly the shepherd for Catholics around the world. During this episode, we will shed light on the detailed yet secretive process that occurs when a new Pope is elected. Also, we will present to you how certain popes use their title to influence the masses for the better, and how others abuse the power of their given role. This and much more is coming up right now on Mysteries of the Church. According to the Gospel of Matthew, as Christ approached the end of his life on earth, he appointed Apostle Peter to be the leader of his followers. He renamed him Caiaphas, an Aramaic word meaning rock. He said, "Thou art Peter, and upon this rock I shall build my church."
Peter found his way to Rome and is considered the first bishop of Rome. And consequently, the notion developed that the Bishop of Rome had a special place in the church.
The Pope, beyond that, has numerous other titles, Vicar of Christ, for instance, successor of Peter, and so on. All of these titles are more or less honorific, but they do point to the Pope's importance for how the church runs, how it unifies itself, and frankly, how it approaches other religious traditions, especially Christian traditions.
As Roman Catholic tradition has it, the papacy is the responsibility of leading the church, and so Peter would be our very first pope, and all others since then are his successors. That statement, now known as the Petrine Promise, gave Peter the freedom and power to universally guide Christians in the direction of purity, so that they may one day achieve everlasting life in heaven. And that is ultimately the supreme role of the Pope as the leader of the Catholic Church.
We have, 263, depending on who you include within the list of popes, roughly 1/3, 76 popes have been declared saints.
But the Bishop of Rome has always sort of held out a hand to those Christians who are outside of communion. What the Pope does for those Christians, especially those Christians in the West, is to provide a kind of hub for all of the different spokes in the wheel of Christianity.
Today, the leader of the Catholic Church is Pope Benedict XVI, and he resides in the Vatican in Rome. This location holds great importance because it was literally built over St. Peter's grave on Janiculum Hill, later named St. Peter's Square. It is certainly one of the most visited sites known to Christians. It is at the Vatican where all Catholic doctrine is controlled and where matters pertaining to the Church are sorted out. It is the duty of our Pope to monitor any and all Catholic happenings. He must also be aware of global matters that affect us.
He is a kind of center point or focal point for action and service. Not only that, the Pope also serves as a kind of unifying head for the Church. He's, in common parlance, he's kind of like the go-to guy. If there are issues in the Church that need resolution, the Pope is, in many instances, the person of last resort. He settles all kinds of problems and sets policy for the universal church.
His decisions and actions must be carefully planned because with over 1 billion followers, anything he does impacts the world. The papacy is the Pope's office, and the government of the Church is called the Holy See. His jurisdiction isn't limited to Rome, it is only his primary location. Actually, any place that Catholics live may be considered the spiritual territory of the Pope.
You have to realize that the Catholic Church is in every corner of the world, and the kinds of information that's shared between its members on the ground almost inevitably filters back into the Vatican as a kind of hub. And so when it comes to intelligence around the world, even the United States pales in comparison.
When we return, we will discover how a new Pope is appointed today, and we will take a look at the differences in papal authority throughout history. So please join us when Mysteries of the Church continues. Welcome back. We're discussing the life and history of the papacy. The way in which popes have been appointed has changed drastically throughout history. However, one aspect of the process that has never changed is that no pope is to take position until the death of the previous pope. Today, the pope is elected from the Sistine Chapel by the cardinals.
Not only are they responsible for the daily functioning of the Church in the absence of the Pope, they are responsible for getting a new Pope elected.
When a pope dies, an official of the papal court will take over until a new pope is elected. Currently, this role is performed by Tarcisio Cardinal Bertone. Traditionally, the first thing he does is verify the pope's death by calling out his name 3 times from St. Peter's Square. When there is no response, it is officially confirmed that the pope has passed on. From there, it is decided among up to 120 cardinals what type of pope is needed to head the Church.
At one point, the number of cardinals was 70, then 120. From the 13th century on, generally the cardinals selected one of their own.
The conclave, as it is called, takes place over a span of roughly 15 to 20 days. However, there have been cases when this has lasted for years. In the 13th century, it took almost 3 years to elect a new pope.
Sometimes, in the Church's history, the crowds in Rome have hurried up the cardinals in one way or another. Either they've stopped food from going into the quarters of the cardinals as they are meeting. Sometimes they will pelt the quarters with stones. We don't have this nowadays, of course, but when the conclave drags on for weeks and months and sometimes years, the crowds can get a little antsy.
When Pope Clement IV died in 1268, the cardinals found themselves in a political battle in which several cardinals refused to vote. To push the cardinals to vote, they were only given bread and water to eat, and the roof above where they stayed was removed. These drastic actions seemed to work because a new pope was elected shortly after. Once a decision is made, the cardinals head to the conclave where the papal voting begins.
So that the College of Cardinals meets. It holds 2 votes per day. It is in conclave until a pope is elected, and supposedly it's to be secret.
The cardinals are, by their nature and by the dint of their position, public individuals. But when they enter into the Sistine Chapel to pray for the next successor, they do so under very, very tight security. The Vatican Radio and Television will broadcast the proceedings of the conclave inside the Sistine Chapel, but when the cardinals retire for their own private meetings, or to their own private quarters, you better believe that there is no way that the outside world has any influence on them. The walls are swept for all kinds of listening devices. Security is very, very tight.
To qualify for the position of Pope, one must be an ordained bishop, and he must receive at least 2/3 of the cardinal votes. Usually the cardinals select one of their own, but this is not mandatory.
Theoretically, someone outside of the College of Cardinals could be selected Pope. The only real qualification is that he be male, because the Pope has to be Bishop of Rome, and to be Bishop of Rome he has to be ordained, and of course the Church only ordains men.
Each member of the group writes on a ballot paper, "Eligo in summum pontificem." I elect as Supreme Pontiff, followed by the name of whomever they wish to vote for. Outside the chapel, crowds await the decision of the cardinals, and when the ballots are burned, they are burned so that the crowd can see the color of the smoke.
If the cardinals do not have a candidate just yet, black smoke is sent up through a mixture of hay and the ballots themselves. Black smoke is sent up a chimney on top of the Sistine Chapel, and the crowd is alerted that there is in fact no pope yet. But when white smoke goes up that same chimney, this alerts the crowd that good news is about to befall them.
The bells of St. Peter's Basilica chime to celebrate the appointing of a new pope, and the dean of the College of Cardinals will ask the selected cardinal if he accepts the position, and if so, which name he wishes to live by. Once established, the cardinal immediately becomes Pontifex Maximus, the Holy Roman Pontiff. The proto-deacon of the College of Cardinals makes the announcement to the world, and the new pope then gives his apostolic blessing to all the people of the world. When we return, we'll hear of controversies attached to the papacy right here on Mysteries of the Church. Welcome back. You're watching Mysteries of the Church, and we're discussing elements of the papacy. Although Vatican City is considered to be a holy environment, there have been instances where that foundation has been tainted, especially during the papacy of Alexander VI. The papacy of Alexander VI is noted as one of the most unethical times of the Church. Alexander VI was elected Pope in 1492 after the passing of Pope Innocent VIII. Prior to his election, it has been rumored that he used his financial backing to buy his votes, as well as to bribe others being considered for position.
What's even more scandalous, perhaps, is the fact that the cardinals who were to elect a new pope after the death of Pope Innocent VIII, they took the bribes. They could have always refused, but they probably saw the handwriting on the wall that another Borgia was going to become pope, and they needed to take what they could while they could.
So here was a man who was politically ambitious, sought to expand his state and his power, lived a luxurious life, but he did some good things as well.
He is one of those so-called bad popes. Again, another Borgia pope, but someone who, his indiscretions aside, still managed to keep the papacy intact. He managed to reach out to Spain and to keep it Catholic.
But this wasn't the only controversy. It also happened during the papacy of Pope John XII.
I think Pope John XII is one of those popes that behaved badly. That is to say, he accrued power to himself by essentially trying to destroy other European rulers.
The young Pope found himself filled with doubt over his agreement with King Otto and attempted to counteract his decision. He met with Albalbert, the son of Italian King Berengarius, and told him of King Otto's intentions of defeating his father and suggested how to beat King Otto I.
The ways in which he went about severing ties or using the powers of his office in order to put European civil rulers in check set a very bad precedent for future popes.
Pope Gregory I was more commonly known as Gregory the Great because of how influential his papacy was. Although he was always in poor health, it is said that he never rested and refused to retire to bed until all his work was done. He took his duties as bishop and then eventually pope extremely seriously, so much so that he published a book that listed what he firmly believed to be required of a bishop. The book was titled Liber Pastoralis Curae, also known as the Book of Pastoral Care. Divided into 4 parts, the book contained chapters on what a bishop should be, how he must act, the point of view he must take, and what he should be aware of.
It's one of the reasons why I think Gregory stands out as a really fine pope, not just for his learning and scholarship, but that kind of character. And he himself eschewed the title of pope. He instead referred to himself as the servant of the servants of God. Really a kind of humble position, but out of that humility grew great things.
It was important to Pope Gregory I that traditions be carried on and that the elders lead the youth. It was his belief that this was the natural order of things. Finally, his publications contained advice to the bishops to be aware of themselves, warnings against the internal temptation to regard oneself more highly than he should. He stated that the greater the work of a bishop, the stronger the risk of failing through self-confidence.
One didn't enter upon civil service in Rome without a real sense of noblesse oblige, a real sense of duty, and a real sense of honor. But there was accompanying that office a certain glamour, and Gregory didn't want to have any of that.
This book laid down a foundation for the bishops who lived during Pope Gregory's time and for all those who followed. As of today, there have been 265 popes, and of them, 76 have been canonized as saints. This clearly shows the holiness surrounding the papacy. It is no surprise that popes have the ability to change the world. An example of this is Pope Leo XIII. A great concern of his was to make a connection between people and the church. One of his primary objectives was to bridge the gap between the modern world and the ancient organization of Christianity. He reasserted that religion does coexist with science. This was a validation for many of those who had drifted away from the church. Another concern of his was that the working class be respected and acknowledged within the Catholic Church. He's most famous for vindicating the rights of poor people and hard workers with his encyclical Rerum Novarum, which led to his title as the Pope of the Working Class.
Rerum Novarum recognized the social problem and recognized that the Church could not simply be opposed to radical communism and Bolshevism, but had to have a program of its own, and that the workers had rights and needs that the Church should and would recognize.
Karl Marx had put forward the idea that the masses were being duped by religion into believing that their only true function was to be a cog in a machine. Pope Leo comes out and says, well, you know, that's not exactly true. The Church has to side with those individuals whose rights are in jeopardy.
Leo XIII's actions of defending the working class has never truly been done before, and it changed the lives of many who were finally granted recognition of their rights as Catholics. Leo XIII was not radical in his theological or social teachings, but what he did do was help bring the Catholic Church into the mainstream by creating a connection between all social classes. While it is true that the Pope is only human, the papacy comes with responsibilities that stretch far beyond earthly matters. He is the successor of Peter, the rock that this church has been built upon. He is responsible for guiding us towards a holy life and to protect the mind and body of the Catholic Church. Thank you for watching Mysteries of the Church. Until next time.